How can we turn ideas into practice and words into objects? I'm going to show you quickly a research method which was developed basically for PhD students to help them construct PhD thesis, where you organize your knowledge, your intuitive knowledge, your pre-knowledge, and you then produce a thesis. We're going to use that method into art. So we're not going to produce a thesis, we're going to produce artwork, objects. Let's look at some examples. This is the work of artist Hanoch Piven. Hanoch Piven uses found objects, anything he can find around him, and he constructs from the found object illustrations, 3D illustrations. Now the point is that the found objects have meaning. They must relate, the object must relate to the personality of the illustration, of the person depicted in the illustration. For example, who do you think is that? This is an illustration of Jay Leno. Now Hanoch Piven would start with painting the background using probably acrylics. So he would paint the background here, and he would paint the hair and the shape of the face. This is all acrylic. But then he uses found objects which relate directly to the person. For example, he uses microphones here. And why microphone? Because Jay Leno is a TV personality. And the American flag here, which makes the eye, the American flag. Why American flag? Because Jay Leno is American, maybe he's also a patriot. And as you can see, the flags make the shape of the eye. So these are flag pins that you probably found somewhere, and he uses here for illustrating Jay Leno. We see that the handle of a watch, the arms of the watch, make the shape of the mouth. And we see from 10 until 12, because Jay Leno's show was broadcast at that time from 10 p.m. in the evening to 12 at midnight. Let's look at another example. Who is that? You can't get wrong. That's Barbara Streisand. Of course, a microphone, because she is a singer. And a microphone which makes the nose, because she has, let's face it, notable nose. So with one single found object, one item, Hanoch Piven illustrates his subject. And the found object have direct meanings. Now let's look quickly at this research method which was developed to help PhD students construct the PhD thesis. Today we're going to use it to construct art. The process of academic thinking is a research method which says that people, not just PhD students, but anyone, already know inside what their interests. So people know what they love, they have pre-knowledge or intuitive knowledge, and they have some ideas of what they want to do in their PhD, want to do in their lives. Now the problem is that we stop listening to ourselves. There's so much noise out there. We listen to what the society is telling us, we listen to what our parents are expecting from us to do, we listen to what the government is encouraging us to do. There's so much external noise that people stop listening to themselves. If you don't listen to yourself, you cannot listen to other people. So, this research method is based on the idea that student, and likewise any other person, already know inside what they love, what their interest, what is the topic that they want to develop. For a PhD student, you will develop your PhD on that topic, on that subject that you interest. But this method is good for everyone. It's good also if you want to construct a single A4 500 words article, because it helps you to construct your idea in a coherent way. We're asking the student to come up with answers to a few questions. These are the questions that we're asking the student to answer, and these are the answers that the student will come up with. We start with asking the student what is the topic. In this case, the topic is creativity in art. It has to be quick and immediate. That's what interests me. Topic could be anything. It could be table. After they come up with a topic, they have to come up with a definition of the topic, and that is one sentence that defines the topic. Creativity in art could be defined as the process of inspiration, conception, and application in art making. It looks complex, but it's very simple. If you chose a different topic, table, then your definition could be an object to lay things on. After that, we're asking for three categories that explain your topic and come out of your definition. If it was a table, which was defined as an object to lay things on, three categories could be forelegs, nails, and a surface. These are three categories that define the table. You can then go into subcategories, subcategories, conclusion for each category, and overall conclusion. Now let me explain the logic behind everything here. So the idea is to first listen to yourself, and this is why we're asking students a few questions, and they need to give us the answer. That is the answer that the student provides. And we ask them to give an answer very quickly, instantly. Students receive only 3 minutes only, to come up with a topic. The topic will be what you want to do your research about. And you do this exercise even before you go to the literature, even before you go to the library and you start to read. Because the problem today is that students go to the library, and there's so much books around them, they don't know what to choose, they don't know what to do. They go like this. They don't know what's the relevant information to draw. If you do this method and you first listen to yourself before you read the books, then you know what interests you. For example, the topic, 3 minutes to come up with a topic. My topic, my only interest was creativity in art, because that's what interests me. That is what I want to do a PhD about. That is what I want to focus. It is nothing from the external that forces me to come up with. But the topic could be something as simple as a table. It could be a table. You want to tell me, Gil, I want to do a research about a table. I want to do an artwork about tables. Why? Because that's what interests me. So you get 3 minutes only when you're doing a PhD to come up with your topic, which is the subject which you are going to research. Why 3 minutes? Because if we'll give you a lot of time, then you will start to consider what other people want you to do, what your parents asking you to do. You will start to consider the external world, and we don't want to do that. If we give you 3 minutes, if it's instant, if it's immediate, it comes from within, it comes from you. So 3 minutes to decide on your topic. Once you have decided your topic, then it's easier for you to go to the library. You go to the library, you ignore all these books because they're not relevant, you focus there, you say, that is my topic. These are the books that I need to draw. Then you can relate your book, and the books support you. You don't have to get lost in so many books, but you use the relevant books. So 3 minutes to choose to come up with your topic. In a PhD, that will be the topic of your subject. Today I'm going to show you a method, how we're going to draw it back to art. You've decided your topic, in this case a table, very simple, table. Then you have 3 minutes to come up with a definition of a table. What is a table? Because a table is a huge topic, it could be anything. So you can tell me, a table is an object to lay things on. Very simple. You must define your topic. You must be very specific about your topic. Because in a PhD, you have only 3 years to do research. That's not a lot, so you have to be very specific. And there's always the danger that sometimes people come up with words, with topics, but they mean something else. So your definition, which is basically saying the same thing again, using different words, your definition gives you a point of reference on your topic. And then you can assess it and see if that is really what you want to do. So 3 minutes for your topic, a table. 3 minutes to come up with a definition. Then we ask students to come up with 3 categories. Categories are the ingredients that make up your topic. What is a table? What makes a table? So you can tell me, table, very simple. It has 4 legs, it has nails, and it has a surface. Now, when you tell me these 3 categories, 4 legs, nails, surface, immediately I would understand that you're talking about a table, something to lay things on. Now, we always ask students to come up with 3 categories, never 2, because 2 can clash, they can act like a ping pong. It's going to end up as a 2-dimensional work. When you create 3 categories, you create a 3-dimensional work. Now, when you do a PhD, you also continue to subcategories. So each category now is divided to 3 subcategories. And again, you do all that before you go to the library, before you do a library research, because this is still your intuitive a priori knowledge. In a PhD, you will then write subcategories. You will then write conclusion for each category, and from the 3 conclusions, you will then produce a overall conclusion, final conclusion, which is now, we can say, it's only hypothesis. It's only an assumption. It is based on your a priori knowledge, on your intuitive knowledge. Now you have to back it up. So now you will go to the library. Now you do your library research. And now you will focus the books that are relevant to you. Now I'm going to bring that research method back into art. So the proposed idea here is to produce a 3D project based on this method. And the way to do it is to divide the class into groups, so it's not individual work, it's groups, and each group has 30 seconds, not 3 minutes, but 30 seconds to come up with a topic. The topic will be the object that they're going to create. You can tell me a table, you can tell me Margaret Thatcher, because you want to produce a sculpture or three-dimensional object on Margaret Thatcher, like the example from Hanoch Piven, who did Barbara Streisand that I showed you earlier. It could be anything. In groups, students are coming up with a topic, 30 seconds to come up with a topic, 30 seconds to define it, and 30 seconds to give you 3 categories. Then the students go out, they look for any found object, and it could be anything. It could be your mobile phone, pencil, cardboard. If you go out to the park, it could be bits of tree, leaves, anything. They bring it back, and they have to construct their topic, their subject, using those found materials, but they must use the categories. So, for example, I had one group chose the topic of teapot, and the 3 categories was spout, handle, and body. So they went out to look for object, and they came back and they constructed a teapot based on their 3 categories: spout, handle, and a body. So this is a research method used for PhD students, but the idea is to draw it back into art using words that students are coming up with and turning words into objects.